What's up, guys? It's Frito here. Season 2.5 is the biggest shift in the Marvel Rivals meta I think we've ever seen, with a host of balance adjustments that would attack the meta anyway, but a big shift in the team-ups that's going to radically change how we play the game, and I think actually creating quite a rock, paper, scissors type meta. We're going to get into explaining all of that and what to expect with the biggest winners and losers in the shakeup. Importantly, these four team-ups are being removed. The heavy-handed one here is Spider-Man losing the symbiote bond. Punisher is losing infinite ammo with Rocket, but he will be getting some buffs separately. The very rarely seen Allied Agents team-up is going away, but they are getting their own new team-ups as well as buffs to themselves. Jeff loses the offensive upgrade with Luna Snow and gets a rework. So in general, the offensive solo flanking Jeff playstyle is pretty much dead. Thor and Jeff are getting a bit of a rework to their mechanics. This one is to make Thor's alternate fire actually useful. It doesn't consume Thor force. In fact, it grants it. The devs explain with hammer throw removed from the shareability pool, now recovering lightning energy on hits, Thor can rapidly cycle through Awakening Rune, Hammer Throw, Mjolnir Bash for longer durations. Additionally, Thor can now utilize Hammer Throw's long-range energy recovery to his advantage, first repositioning with Storm Surge to high ground our flanks, then following up with a Hammer Throw, Awakening Rune for strong range damage output. Originally, Thor always had a slow cadence of downtime between each action, as he can now use the Hammer Throw to start off a chain of ranged attacks immediately thereafter, improving his burst potential. His stats are going to be rebalanced though to compensate for this, which I think will be important since there's been so many flyers in the meta and we're adding an extra one now with Ultron. This hero introduction gameplay videos that Marvel Rivals puts out isn't so useful to knowing how they're going to come into the meta. Often are just showcases for the cool things that they can do. Permanent fly as a strategist, that's rare, and his ultimate is offensive in nature. Otherwise, he has a different packaging of damage and healing like most other supports. New heroes added to Marvel Rivals have been a bit boom or bust in performance. Whether or not you're happy for him to be one of your supports or a necessary third support if he's too focused on damage remains to be seen. Keep in mind, with an Ultron on your team, you do not have a defensive ult, which can be okay. Rocket ult was fine before they added defensive properties to it. I think the Rivals community could benefit from having a more offensive-minded game plan to their team comps. With defensive ults, you feel like you can sustain every single fight, but if your team comp is more offensive in nature, it's more about wiping the enemy, dodging the fights you can't win, rather than holding your ground and expecting to sustain through everything. The other major rework was to Jeff the Land Shark. As for Jeff, they accidentally showed a work in progress in the balance update, and so this video is the final version of the new splash that he shoots out, a Coalescence-esque AoE heal and attack. We've also improved the feel of Joyful Splash, increasing the water flow speed for smoother control. In the updated version, Joyful Splash now pierces both allies and enemies, healing teammates while damaging opponents. Charges his ultimate faster, making combos like Sharknado with Storm or solo initiations more effective than ever. It seems clear to me that they're really trying to kill the flanking Jeff playstyle. The Luna team-up leaving will be one factor. They completely rebalanced his self-heal, less bubbles that heal over time instead. He'll be much less of a burst threat and much more of a normal backliner, perhaps even overtaking the stats of a character like Cloak and Dagger, who has a similar backliner but I can still defend myself style gameplay. Doubling down on Jeff's new playstyle is the symbiote bond, which has him heal a teammate close to him, similar to Venom damaging his enemies with his alternate fire. My only issue with this is if you're playing with a Venom, then maybe you have to go in with him in order to use it to heal your teammates, like how Penny and Venom technically had a team up that was useful but just awkward because you have one backliner tank and one dive tank. They're pushing Jeff to play in the backline. Now he needs to be close to his dive teammate in order to heal him, but I certainly think with your tank diving, if you are on the backline, healing your support will be an added boost of survivability up against aggression from the enemy, which tends to easily walk in when your tank is diving, not holding the front line. So at the very least, that'll ease that over. Now, the other major thing that I want to point out with the team ups, aside from the balance tuning that also seems to favor trying to boost up Hawkeye and Black Widow, is as we start to give technical skills to the sniper class characters, they become more and more of an obvious pick. Because Black Widow has become more brawly with good movement and a stun, she actually can fight back against divers fairly decently if you're good at her. So now with a cleave attack, I feel like they're pushing the community to try this hero. Hawkeye, we've already seen be devastating in the past, and with his improvements in a ranged attack, it's a little scary what shooting a snowball can do in an AoE. That one is on a 20-second cooldown though, at least for the moment. Now, of course, with snipers, you have to have players that can aim playing them, so there's always going to be a bit of a rank distribution with that. However, the more cooldown and utility based they are, the more all players can potentially use them. Particularly, I think, with the power of the Penny team up, because Penny and Rocket are very easy characters to play, and now the BRB acts almost as a third spider nest. Typically, you want to hide the beast so the enemy can't clear it, but now that it defends itself, you can put it in the formation of the spider nest, amplifying its effect. Keep in mind, Penny's natural counter are poke heroes. Any ranged character that can poke out the spider nests before they have to get on the webs and take the damage from the drones turn her off as a character, but she at the very least slows the game down. But I think the power of this alone is going to stop for the melee dominant characters, Spider-Man, Iron Fist, etc., from dominating a lot of the ranked ladder. As a strategist player playing near these penny nests, or being the Rocket Raccoon laying down your own, you have no excuse for a melee character to get on top of you. But keep in mind, we've got Thor having a ranged attack, Ultron having a ranged attack. The meta is pretty quickly going away from dive, but honestly, snipers and ranged characters tend to be weak to dive. There's a meta paradox going on, and something I want to discuss as a concept in hero shooters as season 2.5 develops. The pro meta is one thing off to the side. They often exploit the most consistent teamwork options, but in our ranked games, the most common meta is usually the path of least resistance. Whatever's the easiest thing to get away with, like Spider-Man or Iron Fist diving your backline, is very effective because peeling and playing together and just walking out of spawn together is less common with random teammates with no communication. So that naturally is going to be a strong way to play in an unorganized environment. Keep in mind, I did make a how to counter dive video, which for those that did watch it, gave some really positive feedback on it. An interesting thing happens in hero shooter games where as soon as the player base develops the skill set, those skills don't decay just because other characters get stats. Since the poke heroes that they're enabling with stats are naturally countered by dive, you're still going to need to know how to outplay it, even though the stats are more favored in your hands. So while they're pushing the main meta to slow down to be about poke and slow characters, at least outside of the protection of the triple penny nest, dive will still be effective. Captain America is taking a hit to his survivability and ultimate frequency. Health goes down, shield recovery on Living Legend goes up to 4 seconds, big windows of downtime for him, and the cost of his ult goes up a little bit. Captain America will have to be much more thoughtful when he goes in, mainly just due to the delay on the shield. A small hit to his health definitely matters, but that won't be so noticeable. The first couple seasons, Captain America felt like he wasn't playing at a pace that could keep up with the game and was situational and maybe underrated. Then they overstated his ability to go in. Thanks to the high healing numbers, he could easily cycle in the front line and brawl his way to victory. A brawly character like this tends to adjust based on the amount of poke threat that's coming through. If you have a Penny and a Punisher turret and a Rocket, you could kill a Captain America. You need the right combination of frontline pressure to work him down in the front, but most characters can't do that. And there's a bunch of characters that would negate the math of having the correct offense that are really popular in the game. Like Cloak and Dagger players, while they're very good as healers, they don't add much damage threat, especially not at range. So while they made this easier, I also think that the Marvel Rivals community doesn't necessarily do a great job doing the macro math of what their team comp can do. And there's a lot of combinations of heroes that simply can't kill certain frontline characters. Last patch, or the current one before 2.5 comes through, Captain America was the winner for that. In previous iterations of Strange or Magneto, they also felt unkillable if they played their cooldowns correctly. They just were a little less annoying because they didn't have mobility. But especially if you have a diver that doesn't add to the frontline poke trade, or a support that's more defensive, your frontline pressure just won't be harsh enough to beat certain Vanguards in the game who are designed to take a beating and get healed a lot. Strange gets a couple buffs. The damage fall off of Daggers of Danak holds onto its range damage for longer now. The wording of the patch notes really annoying, but it used to have 62.5% of its damage at its max range. Now it'll maintain 80% of its damage at 20 meters. However, I don't know if you're effectively hitting a lot of your shots at 20 meters because it has a natural spread and your targets are farther away. More importantly was the upfront throughput damage that they nerfed heavily in the previous nerfs to him. This will make him more consistent. He'll charge his ult faster, but I don't know if you are really much of a threat hitting targets from that far. But keep in mind, lots of flyers we're seeing prevalence in season 2.0, and in 2.5 they're going to add Ultron, who's going to be flying away in the distance. So Strange maintaining more damage at range definitely helps, but he's just not that scary with his damage. However, they removed the range damage fall off on Maelstrom of Madness, which that will certainly help him confirm kills and rack up more damage, particularly I'd say when he uses his ultimate, which is where I notice it being inexcusable to have the damage nerfed that they gave him before, because he just can't really make his ult plays that he used to. Now, ulting and following up with Maelstrom of Madness on multiple targets will be much more effective because you'll be maintaining full damage the full way through, being rewarded for properly channeling up on your offense. We'll be seeing a big resurgence this half season, mainly because so many of the other tanks got harsher nerfs. Emma Frost gets rebalanced quite a bit. Her primary fire, Telepathic Pulse, goes up in range from 15.5 meters to 18. That's quite significant considering it gains power the longer you hit, but she loses everywhere else. Her shield goes down to 400 health. The cooldown of her crush attack goes up from 5 to 6 seconds. Decrease the hit damage of Crystal Kick from 50 to 40, and decrease the extra damage dealt when propelling the enemies into walls. Groot gets 2 nerfs, decrease the damage of Vine Strike from 70 to 65, and increase Iron Wall's cooldown from 8 to 12 seconds. When an attack loses a small bit of damage like this, you have to start to add up the break points over time. How many attacks does it take for him to kill a certain health point target? Instead, I'd say you're going to notice it most when farming up your ultimate. And while Groot was counterable by the hard Groot counters that exist right now, I'd say the big damage of Punisher, but especially Wolverine, who can kidnap him, some of the best ways that people would counter Groot head on. But now Ironwood Wall's cooldown goes from 8 seconds to 12, which is a huge increase. That's the one that gives him shields when he hits his attack. The major way he's going to sustain his life while brawling for a prolonged period of time. In the dev update, they made it seem like Groot's getting a nerf, so is Emma Frost, and there's buffs coming to Strange and Magneto, and I'm unsure if any of them are all that impactful numbers-wise. I think Groot's still going to be good against his positive matchups, particularly the shield tanks, or really anything that wants to hold the front line. This was a bit of a cupcake nerf, in my opinion. While Ironwood Wall's cooldown goes up to a significant amount, 12 seconds, if you place it around a corner, which a lot of top group players already do, well, they gain a lot of the benefit from that within its effective range, and you might not have to put it in harm's way at all, or even need it this often. If you destroy it, then the cooldown will be significant, but I don't think he has to do that, particularly if he has a main tank in front of him. Magneto gets an increase to the charging speed of his rings from 4 seconds a stack to 3 seconds. It'll take 9 full seconds, down from 12 to get the triple stack for it to deal max damage with the ult fire. It also is a crowd control tool, which is particularly good up against the melee dive characters, though I don't think Mag's great against them, but that is his tool to deal with them. The one matchup I think this helps him the most in is up against Wolverine. A character who is all in on closing the distance will get no value if he doesn't, and playing keep away longer can be the difference maker between poking out the Wolverine. With a lot of flyers in range characters, having the rail attack at range more often just increases his poke against the things he's already good at. So among the tanks that got buffed here, I think Mag wins even more than Strange does for sure. We showed Thor's rework earlier, but here is the accompanying balance changes as well. The hammer doesn't cost Thor force or trigger the universal cooldown, but instead the hammer throws on a 6-second cooldown, and he'll gain 1 Thor force for each hammer throw enemy hit, decrease the throw hit damage from 70 to 45, and the return from 30 to 20. But there's a chance there that you can hit multiple enemies with the throw, and you're using it more to farm up more Thor Force just so you can keep your ranged attack going longer. But decrease the shield value gained when consuming Thor Force and adjust the bonus health gained from each Thor Force consumed from 100 to 75, and adjust the maximum bonus health from 250 to 100. So you'll get your transform more often, but you'll get less health from it. Thor was a bit strange last patch because he either could delete you or get deleted himself, and that risk as a Vanguard is just not worth it. Marvel Rivals isn't really that kind of game where that kind of risk pays off. Now remember, Hawkeye gets a new team up with Luna Snow. Here's the balance changes. Increase the base damage of his arrow from 32 to 34. Projectile of blast arrow goes from 15 to 16 in the spell field, 32 to 34. Increase the maximum focus from 70 to 75, and increase the charging speed when aiming at the enemy from 100 a second to 108 a second. Change the fall off speed from 30 to 32 a second. I thought Hawkeye was already pretty good and powerful. This will make him much more consistent. So rather than getting bursted by a Spider-Man, you might now be annoyed from being bursted by a Hawkeye. In the range damage dealer category, I feel Hela just consistently is losing ground. Beaten down with the Nerf hammer early in the game's life, and now the creep up from the other snipers makes her hard to justify, though I do think she still has the best ult. I didn't see the team up get swapped out for Hela, so her with the improved Thor may still be devastating. But other than that, I think the snipers might just be a better option in a lot of maps. Human Torch was an interesting character because a lot of players don't know how to play him, but the ones that do were dominating in the last split of the season. So he's getting some nerfs. Reduce the damage of fire cluster from 7 per hit to 6. Increase the charge speed of blazing blast from 2 seconds to 3. Decrease the shield value gained from flaming meteor from 75 to 50, and increase the cooldown from 15 seconds to 20. Among the ranged glass cannon flyer characters, Human Torch, Iron Man, and Storm, I feel it would be difficult for them to be equally viable at any given time because they're all too similar in what they do. I think the only difference is maybe Iron Man has the highest solo duel potential if the stats are in his favor, and has a burst ultimate, but in general the three of them have a ranged pressure playstyle and play in the same position since they all can fly. Human Torch seemed to have the most flexibility, and at least on the last split was dealing more damage than Storm, which might still be the case honestly. Iron Fist is catching some L's. Lower Dragon's defense damage blocked bonus health conversion rate from 1.5 to 1.3. Decrease the maximum bonus health converted from damage blocked from 200 to 175. Slightly decrease the dash distance of Yet Ji Chung Quen to the Z-axis direction when there is no target. Reduce Dragon's defense cooldown reduction from Jeet Kune Do hits from 1.5 to 1 second. So his verticality that he couldn't gain by attacking, he has to have a target to do that now, which dramatically changes his mobility. He used to be able to do that action in order to gain height to close the distance on flyers, where then he would auto attack onto them. Now it's gonna be a little bit harder for him to gain that same closing the distance ability. So flyers have a bigger matchup against Iron Fist, and then everything will have a better matchup against Iron Fist. Here they remove Iron Man's Gamma Overdrive and the Gamma Charge team up, but a new team up anchor effect from the Stark Protocol team up with Ultron. Balance changes decrease the projectile damage of the third repulsor blast from 50 to 45, and decrease the spell field damage from 60 to 55. Reduce Armor Overdrive's maximum bonus health from 100 to 50. Now he got nerfs there technically, but as a team up anchor, he gets a base 5% damage boost output, which he gets regardless of if the team up is activated or not. Importantly, the third repulsor shot shoots 2 of them at once, and this will slightly decrease that third shot, but because he gets a 5% flat damage bonus anyway, his other shots are gaining that benefit always. So yes, he's losing on that special third repulsor blast double hit, but that kind of doesn't matter because it was already extra damage to begin with. I think overall he's gonna be doing a lot more damage, in fact. The third shot is just slightly, it's -5 now. That's what it comes out to in the math. It's a little crazy that they put this much work into explaining something that's ultimately going to be a 5 damage difference. But overall, he's doing 5% more damage on his first and second normal shots anyway, which just evens out his damage spikes. Armor Overdrive, losing 50 health does feel bad, but keep in mind, Iron Fist will struggle to close the distance on you. Spider-Man is a little less viable now in the air since he lost the team up with Venom. So I don't care about this 50 less health because Iron Man's a glass cannon anyway. You don't want to be targeted so much. And often when you're using Armor Overdrive, it's to deal lots of damage. So if you are locked in a duel, you better be trying to win it through time to kill as opposed to just tanking. And if you're ever getting shot as Iron Man, you're failing anyway, because you either fight from range or hard flank. That's what he does. Namor. Increase the cooldown of Blessing of the Deep from 15 seconds to 20. Expand Horn of Proteus, his ultimate ability, inner radius from 3 meters to 3.5, and the outer circle radius from 8 to 9 meters. Decrease the outer circle radius hit damage from 200 to 180. So the further extents of the ultimate do slightly less, but in general, much bigger, more forgiving ultimate. Damage fall off starting at 20 meters. But now it gets buffed a bit. It'll do half damage at 40 meters instead. So more consistent range damage on the Monstro spawns, which I think are most effective at poking out melee characters that are flanking on you. The Monstro spawns were much more effective when the Ice team up with Luna was there. But now that he has the Gamma one, it's more situational and not really that good at being a turret against flanks, more of a frontliner nuking ability. I will say a 5-second cooldown increase on Blessings of the Deep. This will help move Namor from being one of the top duelists in the game. And while he's slightly more effective with the amount of damage he deals with his turrets at range and how devastating his ult is, having a much bigger window where he doesn't have an escape makes him a lot more vulnerable, and I think that matters far more. So overall, I actually think diving him is better now, because taking a bit more damage from the squids, if you're already not outplaying the squids, so what? You expect the squids to beat you. But now the in-between time from him having an escape and having his squids again, that's extended. Decrease the retrieval damage of wing shurikens from 14 to 12 per hit. Decrease invisibility duration of psychic stealth from 3 seconds to 2. You're really going to have to be careful on which maps you pick Psylocke on now, because that stealth really extends her playability. Maps with small rooms and cover positions, you can set up flanks more easily, but a full second loss on invisibility makes her a lot harder to play. You don't really have any time to decide there. You have to use it just to go in close to assassinate a target. If you have everything set up that well, you could be playing any character at that point. And the retrieval damage hit going down 2 per hit. I believe she shoots 3 of them, so it's actually 6 damage less on the retrieval, and that kill combo where will be a little bit harder to pull off now. Squirrel Girl gets some buffs. Increase the capacity of Burst Acorn from 10 to 12. Decrease the cooldown of Mammal Bond from 12 seconds to 10. Optimize the user experience of Squirrel Blockade, Tail Bounce, and Unbeatable Squirrel Tsunami. Squirrel Girl as a kit has a lot of potential, and I'm a little afraid that they're making her a bit too forgiving with these buffs. Star-Lord's ultimate takes a bit more energy from 3100 to 3400, but the maximum target range goes from 30 meters to 40. Adjust the damage fall off and reducing it from 60% at 40 meters to only reducing to 75 at 40 meters. Star-Lord's ultimate is one you should be using very tactically. You can't spam it out since area of effect healing ultimates counter it. But if you time it correctly, I thought it was one of the best duelist ults in the game. So since you have to be opportunistic with it anyway, I don't know if you necessarily care that it costs a bit more, because now you're just going to get your guaranteed team wipes even easier. Keep in mind, there's flyer characters like Ultron being added to the mix. Star-Lord already was one of the better duelist options up against flyers, because you can spin attack and fly at them and then auto lock on them when flying in your ultimate. Kind of a nut series of buffs. I can't believe they're buffing this character. He was already quite good. Storm's Omega Hurricane goes up in damage from 150 to 160 a second, probably because they just want you to get in there and have fun with the Jeff NATO. 10 damage a second, is that even noticeable? Like, the things that counter it will still counter it, and the combo up with Jeff will just be a little bit more devastating now that it gets empowered by both the buff as well as the Jeff team up. Jeff's new reworked playstyle works with Storm a lot because she is a backline nuker cleave character, and now Jeff does the same thing. He won't be off on his own so much anymore. They're both going to be looking forward and deathballing, shooting down a lane. So now not only their ultimates synchronized, but their playstyle and base kit do as well, making that for being one of the more viable team-ups, I think, in the new 2.5 patch. Punisher has a buff to his ultimate Final Judgment. The movement slow rate goes from 20 to 10% when not firing, and from 40% to 30 when firing. Increased adjudications magazine size from 30 to 40, and the single hit damage from 18 to 19, and slightly reducing the spread when firing. Remember, he's losing the Rocket team up, which was one of the more reliable team ups in the game. Importantly, he has the team up with Black Widow, which will give his maximum health an increase of 25 and a 5% boost in damage output. So this is on top of the buff he already gets. So in many ways, I think Punisher is even more effective than he was with the Rocket team up, because that required your teammate to give you infinite ammo at a useful time, which oftentimes, a lot of times, it just wasn't even useful because the enemy could out heal your damage if it wasn't at the right range. And I'm going to assume the flat team up bonus that he gets applies to his ultimate as well. You would think so, right? So his shotgun and his rifle deal more damage. Thanks to that 5% buff, they buff his damage to 19 per hit. I'm unsure what 5% of that translates to. Depends how the rounding in the game works, but this actual damage is going to be 20 something. And remember, it can crit. That might be a bit of an oversight. That's probably stronger than they want it to be. And with those numbers lining up like that, I'm going to say that Punisher probably still is more reliable than the sniper characters who they keep buffing, mainly because he's easier to play and has some anti-tank kit built in. Hawkeye and Black Widow have a bit of a higher skill ceiling, though. All in all, might make this more balanced than you might think, with several poke options being viable, particularly when you think that the defenses around them with some of the stronger team-ups like the Penny Nest certainly can fortify up against flanks. Here's the stats on the Jeff rework specifically. Joyful Splash will deal damage to enemies at 70 a second and can heal allies through allies and enemies. Damage fall off starts at 20 meters and goes down to 65% at 40 meters, which is still pretty far of range. And that's Star-Lord's ultimate we said earlier, right? So across the frickin' map. And the healing per second goes down a bit from 150 to 130 in those damage fall off zones. But overall, Joyful Splash way better than it used to be. That's because they changed his other abilities, Aqua Burst, to a charge ability where it has maximum 3 charges, and it takes 3 seconds to gain a charge. It gets a new effect. Direct hits now launch enemies up, increase spell field damage from 40 to 45. So that's his alternate fire. And the way they want you to use this is to prioritize your Joyful Splash and then add in some pressure damage. We can see in the UI that there's 3 charges of the alt fire on the side there, which really changes the cadence of his attack pattern, because before he could flank off on his own and just pressure damage the backline forever. Now he's only going to get to have 3 hits. It launches them up as well. There's a bit of a CC effect, so you can CC them into your Joyful Splash, but regardless, you're going to be focusing on doing Joyful Splash a lot more now, which is why they spent the time to improve it. Healing Bubble gets a very important change where it's no longer a burst of healing instantly. It's going to be heal over time, but it heals more now. It used to be instant 85. Now it does 120 over 4 seconds. That's 30 healing a second. Honestly, not a lot. The bubbles no longer launch up enemies. Instead, they gave that to his alt fire, and there's only 3 charges of the bubble. The bubble, not very good. It still retains the ability to give a speed boost when you use it, which is certainly important. So don't underrate that. I think the speed boost is very good, but you only get 3 of them now. I think you'll probably prioritize them for combat escapes and movement, because 30 healing a second is so low that it's hardly going to be the difference maker on whether you live or die. Whereas before, you could stack them up and tank lots of damage and take duels with it. Jeff cannot duel with this anymore, especially when you add it to the hide and seek, where it has an energy cap of max 120 that drains 20 a second while submerged and restores 15 a second when not. That's going to be limiting its use. His ultimate overflow healing on swallowed allies now grants 45 healing per second as bonus health up to 150, which is incentivizing you to your team, though I don't know if we want to actually see that happen. Increase the damage reduction received when taking critical hits from 50 to 70. Jeff has a bigger than normal head hitbox, but they compensate for that by it being less rewarding to hit him in the head. Critical hits tend to do double damage in this game. So if a Hela is headshotting him for double damage, but it takes 70% of that damage, that means you're only gaining an increase of 1.3 extra damage for hitting the head. And so hitting him with other things is probably more useful at that point because that's easier to hit. Increase the energy cost of his ultimate from 4,000 to 4,500. Next up, Luna Snow, giving Luna a boost to combat prowess while slightly reducing the frequency of her ult. Light and Dark Ice healing amount and damage goes from 20 to 22 per round, and that's a triple hit. So the healing and damage goes up from 60 to 66 if you hit all three of the bursts. A new effect to Absolute Zero now grants 50 bonus health per enemy hit, which usually only frees one of them, but maybe it does a little bit of splash damage to surrounding enemies as well. So adding to her defensibility, but the cost of her ultimate goes up by 500. It was 4,500, now it's 5,000. That's going to compensate for her primary doing more because you can headshot, gain more bonus health when you freeze. You're going to be able to duel a lot of threats that come on you now, almost as well as a Mantis can. And while her ult comes online less often, she'll have more mid-fight healing. Remembering, of course, healing you do gets transmuted to your snowflake target as well, so it makes that ability better too. Rocket's repair mode, which is his alt fire, goes down in effectiveness from 55 to 50. This kind of nerf makes sense, but he'll still be good because that Penny team up is serious. And while Adam has an ultimate that can technically res the whole team if you can pull it off, the BRB beacon, especially with the Penny improvement, is so incredibly reliable to res a single pick. And when you add in Rocket's natural defensibility with his movement, still a very competitive option since his ult is so reliable as well. The two areas you'll notice the healing a lot is in big brawly team fights. When you're AoE healing everybody, you're simply just doing 5 less per shot. You might shoot 10 to 20 times into your team. That really starts to add up. You're going to farm your ult less quickly than before. Well, that's it for the patch notes. Let's give some concluding thoughts on the general 2.5 metagame as it's coming out. They clearly want the game to slow down. I think part of the problem was the player base improved at some of the mobility diver DPS. Enough time to really gain some finesse with harassing the backline as Black Panther or Spider-Man, and everyone could play Iron Fist. That guy was kind of easy. But direct nerfs to Iron Fist, making all his stats lower. Spidey got that ranged nerf that I think was fast-tracked in a previous hotfix, loses the team up, and while Black Panther and Magic are still a bit devastating on the ground, more characters are flying, such as Ultron in the sky, and there's more anti-dive than ever on the ground. Mag gets a CC quite a lot more often. Penny gets a devastating team up. Groot loses a bit of a step in that frontline brawl fight, making other options a little bit more promising. I think especially I'm looking towards Thor, who when the game gets a bit chaotic and there's a lot of dive threats, it would have been nice last season for Thor to be a bit more viable. In this new rebuild, he'll be a lot more punishing on the off angle. I think he wins. Jeff probably loses significantly to be more of a metal rank character. Top ranks are definitely back to playing Luna more. Over health on freeze, more damage and healing with the primary, and it crits. And while the stats on Punisher, I think, are quite punishing, he might be at one of his strongest meta placings ever, at least in his effectiveness, but the ranged damage dealers are also at theirs, which will somewhat keep him in check. And it already was the case that I felt that Black Widow, especially up against flyer characters, she was just straight up underrated. But even more so, what's underrated is her skill set to deal with dive threats if they don't overwhelm her enough. And it tends to happen in hero shooter games and the meta overall between the poke, brawl, and dive archetypes. Whatever has the most useful components tends to rise to the top. So last season, with dive being prominent, part of that reason was that supports couldn't defend themselves. Now they have a more effective Luna and a support that can fly and deal decent damage, it looks like. So maybe he can just duel a Spider-Man, I don't know. The culture of the community hadn't quite adapted yet to make tanks peel back. The Thing and Hulk being the best at that, but now I think Thor adds to that mix, giving you another option, and Penny, who is the most effective she probably ever has been. And the truth is, those mobility DPS are so popular that it's hard to make them go away from your games even when you counter them, because the players love to commit into counters anyway. But the more defensible the team formation is, the more you can expect the game to be more in the hands of snipers who can make the impact from range, while most of the other gameplay is a bit of a stalemate. Unless you have Punisher, who's definitely going to be working down tanks rather easily in this next coming patch. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when my videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito. I'll see you guys next time.